My name is Cassandra Wren. They called me junior staff when I walked into the interview. Gregory smiled like he was doing me a favor. Marjorie called me unpolished and warned me not to dream too loudly. What they didn't know was, I already owned the building. While they evaluated my resume, I was finalizing the acquisition that would rewrite their org chart. While they discussed starting salaries, I was reviewing their severance packages. I didn't walk into Virelix to beg for a seat. I walked in to reclaim the one they stole from every woman who was ever told, "You're lucky to be here." Gregory thought he hired a support analyst. What he hired was the beginning of his audit and the ending of their era. If you've ever been talked down to in a meeting you should have led, if you've ever stayed silent in a room that needed your voice, or if you've ever been underestimated, erased, or told to wait your turn, this story is yours too. Drop a comment if you've ever had to fight for a seat at the table, and subscribe if you believe justice isn't loud. It's precise. I kept my expression neutral, chin slightly tilted as though digesting the weight of the opportunity. The irony was almost poetic. Gregory's tone held the same syrupy condescension I'd once overheard him use on interns, back when I still allowed him the illusion of authority. "Tell me, Miss Wren," Marjorie Crane began, her voice clipped and polished like the edge of a letter opener. "What would you say are your greatest weaknesses?" She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her eyes did the cutting. I shifted slightly in the high-backed leather chair. From this angle, I had a perfect view of Gregory's Rolex Daytona, stainless steel, ceramic bezel. Same model I gave my CTO when we closed the Ether deal last spring. Gregory didn't recognize me. Not from photos. Not from industry chatter. Certainly not from my resume, which I'd gutted and redressed into a humble Ivy-adjacent affair with a made-up marketing internship and a single bullet point under leadership. Organized a campus-wide fundraiser for arts education. Victor Huang didn't speak. He observed. That was his brand. The quiet thinker. But I could feel his discomfort ripple just slightly when I met his gaze too directly. Marjorie leaned back, pen tapping her notepad. "You're unpolished. You answer too slowly. And structurally, your thoughts are, let's say, underdeveloped." "Thank you," I said. Gregory chuckled, flipping through the thin stack of papers he believed was my entire life. "We've had a lot of applicants. You're green, sure, but there's a work ethic here, I think. A hunger." I gave him nothing but a nod. The kind that makes men like him feel wise. "We can offer you a starting base of 48, he said, almost kindly. 1,000, 10 vacation days, entry-level benefits. It's a good start for someone like you." "Sounds perfect," I replied. He blinked. Marjorie raised an eyebrow. The silence hung for a beat too long. "You'll learn a lot starting from the bottom," Gregory concluded, closing the folder like a gavel. "That's exactly what I hoped for," I said, and meant it. They thought they'd just hired another quiet, compliant woman with a decent face and an average pedigree. Someone grateful to be in the room. That's what they'd been conditioned to expect. What I gave them, instead, was a perfectly wrapped box of dynamite with a velvet bow. My phone vibrated in my coat pocket. I stood politely. "I appreciate your time," I said, as if this wasn't the last day they'd speak from above me. I stepped into the hallway and retrieved my phone. A single text from my attorney. "Hallwell confirms 62.2% equity. SEC filing cleared. You're in." I smiled as the elevator doors opened. The building was mine. They just didn't know it yet. Hoy ChatGPT. They called my pitch adorably ambitious. I called it my blueprint for domination. The carpet in the old Virelix boardroom smelled like cheap coffee and old money. It was January 2021, and I still believed that ideas, real ideas, could change the world if you just articulated them clearly enough. Naive, maybe. But I had graphs. I had projections. I had fire. Gregory Sutton, with his salt and pepper temples and permanent smirk, glanced at my pitch deck like it was a brunch menu. "You're suggesting we hand over our analytics infrastructure to some algorithm?" he said, dragging the word like a punchline. I smiled tightly. "Not hand over. Integrate. Layer our existing insights with an AI engine trained on macroeconomic signals, behavioral finance, and fairy dust," he interrupted. "Look, Ms. Wren, it's an interesting toy, but what you're describing is tech theater. Smoke and mirrors." I shifted in my seat. "With respect, what I'm describing is the future of asset modeling, real-time response, adaptive allocation, risk thresholds that evolve with human behavior." Marjorie Crane cut in, her tone less cruel but no more encouraging. "We appreciate the creativity. But we've always believed in traditional models. They've served us well. Why fix what isn't broken? Because it was broken. They just didn't know it yet." Elias Monroe sat at the far end of the table, barely noticeable behind his rimless glasses. He hadn't said a word the entire meeting, but when the others gathered their things and filtered out, smug, satisfied, he lingered behind. I gathered my laptop, trying to will away the sting behind my eyes. I was used to rejection, but this felt personal. As I reached the door, Elias stood and quietly approached. Without a word, he slipped a business card into my notebook and nodded once, brief, almost apologetic, before disappearing down the hall. I didn't look at the card right away. I didn't need hope just then. I needed to breathe. The elevator lobby was dim and cold. As I waited, my gaze drifted to a brochure sitting in a plastic stand on the wall. "How to Structure a Strategic Acquisition." I took it. I didn't know why, but I didn't throw it away. 3 years later, the memory still lived under my skin like a slow-burning fuse. Now, in the present, I watched a line graph hiccup downward on Jenna's iPad. The red numbers blinked with clinical cruelty, minus 3.02%. Virelix stock was starting to slide. Jenna, now a polished exec with sharper heels and sharper instincts, nudged her glasses up. "Something triggered a minor sell-off," she said softly. "Probably the Hallwell SEC leak." I sipped my coffee, unbothered. The view from the penthouse office, my office, was better than any elevator lobby. "Timing's perfect," I murmured, and meant it. The ID badge reads, "Support Analyst, Floor 11. My name, my photo, under a title I never applied for. The elevator stopped with a soft ding, its polished steel doors parting like a ceremony for the unremarkable. Floor 11. A forest of beige cubicles stretched in every direction, filled with the soft clatter of keyboards and the white noise of half-hearted phone greetings. I stepped out in loafers I hadn't worn in years and tucked my blouse into a skirt I chose specifically to be ignored. No statement jewelry, no sharp blazer, no trace of the woman they'd once dismissed as ambitious. My desk was beside hers, Danielle Moore, according to the label pinned to the edge of her monitor. She didn't look up when I sat. She was flipping pages of a book hidden beneath her headset mic, her pen moving in rapid shorthand while she responded to a client about a misaligned portfolio. Deep learning, a probabilistic approach. I recognized the cover. I'd recommended that addition to our AI training team 2 quarters ago. "Sorry, sir, but we recommend you hold the position until Thursday's announcement. If you exit now, you may forfeit pre-dividend exposure," Danielle said calmly, typing at double speed. Then she ended the call and went right back to reading. A shadow loomed. Our supervisor, Carl, with a frown that always seemed ready for duty. "Danielle," he said in a tone too sweet to be anything but patronizing, "let's remember to smile when talking to clients, And ditch the jargon. Stick to the script." Danielle blinked once. "Yes, sir." Carl walked off, satisfied with his contribution to morale. I bit the inside of my cheek. The condescension wasn't even subtle. Danielle wasn't being coached. She was being contained. Around me, mid-level analysts slumped into their chairs, eyes glazed from hours of pointless spreadsheets and guidance memos that contradicted themselves. This wasn't a pipeline of talent, it was a filtration system, designed to sift out anyone who threatened the status quo. I watched quietly, took notes on my phone. Each comment, each dismissal, every wasted spark. Then it was my turn. A team lead barked over the cubicle wall. Cassandra, we've got a client from Florida stuck in a rollover freeze. See if you can log it and escalate. I opened the console. The AI model had flagged the case as low priority, but it didn't factor in regional volatility, which meant it ignored the client's exposure to a downstream index fund we'd predicted would spike. 3 clicks. Override, realign, preempt, fixed. Logged and cleared, I said. Someone nearby raised an eyebrow. Already? I missed the regional trigger, I said casually. It was mapped under the wrong macro tag. They stared at me like I'd just spoken in hieroglyphics. I turned back to my screen. This company had brilliant minds in cubicles and idiots in corner offices. No one noticed, or cared, as long as the numbers kept crawling upward. My phone buzzed in my palm. A message from Jenna lit up the screen. Boardroom booked at 3 p.m. Hallwell legal team en route. You ready? Same room, same table. But now, I'm not here for approval. I'm here for closure. The boardroom hadn't changed. Floor-to-ceiling windows still poured light over polished mahogany and ego. The skyline behind the glass buzzed with the same careless rhythm. But the chairs around the table? They might as well have been gravestones. For pride, for complacency, for everything they thought they understood. I stepped in behind Jenna, who was flanked by 2 silent Hallwell attorneys in charcoal suits. They moved like ghosts, sliding manila folders onto the table with practiced indifference. Gregory didn't even glance at them. All right, let's get these HR forms out of the way. Gregory Sutton clapped once, as if summoning enthusiasm. Support analyst onboarding's usually quick. Cassandra, we'll handle your comp structuring later. You'll shadow the portfolio team next week. I didn't reach for the papers. Instead, I closed the folder in front of me. Deliberately. Let the silence linger. Gregory blinked. Everything okay? Jenna spoke before I did, her voice dry and professional. These are SEC clearance documents, time-stamped 2:13 p.m. You'll want to read them. She placed the stack between Gregory and Marjorie, who frowned, then began flipping through the legalese. Victor glanced over, suddenly very interested. Before we get into forms, I said, folding my hands, a small announcement. Gregory chuckled, still scanning the paperwork. What? Already found a better coffee machine? No, I said evenly. As of 2:13 p.m. today, I am the majority shareholder of Virelix Capital Group. The words didn't echo. They detonated in silence. Gregory's face twitched, just once, before he laughed. That's impossible. I didn't blink. You were too busy looking down to see who was climbing past you. Jenna tapped her phone screen. The corner monitor blinked to life. A press release window appeared. Embargoed for 10 more minutes. Hallwell's branding gleamed at the top, flanked by logos from 3 financial outlets. Marjorie's voice was barely above a whisper. This is real? Victor looked at me. Not with confusion, but calculation. He'd seen this coming. He just hadn't known the name of the storm. Gregory shoved his chair back. You can't just walk in here and... And what? I cut in. Sit at the table I now own? Accept the position I've created for myself? You wanted me at the bottom. I started there. Now I'm back. Upstairs. The Hallwell attorneys remained statuesque. Observers? Observers, not enforcers. Yet. That time would come. Jenna's phone vibrated once. She met my gaze. Countdowns begun. I let them sit in silence, the kind that crushes bones, before delivering the final slide. The monitor behind me displayed the Virelix logo, still pristine, still untouched by the truth. I didn't rush. Let them stew. Marjorie's hand hovered over the edge of the conference table, twitching. Victor kept a hand on his chin, unmoving. Gregory had stopped pretending. His knuckles were white against the armrests. "Let's walk through how we got here," I said calmly, turning toward the projection. Slide 1. Shareholder shifts, quarter by quarter. Slide 2. Delaware filing timestamps. Slide 3. Hallwell acquisition confirmation. Slide 4. A signature, Elias Monroe's, alongside an affidavit titled Whistleblower Disclosure regarding internal valuation suppression. No one spoke. "Contrary to popular belief," I said, clicking to the next slide, "I didn't get here by luck. I got here by strategy. 3 years ago, I was dismissed for proposing a real-time AI engine to support Virelix's future. It's now the core of Aegis Labs, which outperformed this company by 312% last fiscal year." Jenna tapped her tablet. On cue, internal feeds across Virelix's servers flickered. Department heads, regional managers, even HR, were now watching the boardroom live. "Here's the moment we got our final buy-in." The screen changed to a scanned agreement, notarized, time-stamped. "And here's what you called me during that process." I clicked again. A projected email filled the screen. From Gregory Sutton. Subject line, Team Hierarchy, NYC Office. One line stood out, bolded. "Let the tech girl fetch coffee. She's enthusiastic enough." Silence. I turned, slowly, back to the table. "You called me junior staff," I said. "Today, I offer you a choice. Severance, generous, clean, or stay and learn from the ground up. You can start where you tried to send me." Gregory stood suddenly, his chair clattering backward. "This is revenge," he spat. I met his eyes. This is correction." Jenna's voice rang out across the conference call line, clear and decisive. "Ms. Moore, please join us upstairs." On floor 11, Danielle Moore froze, headset still perched on her ear. Around her, dozens of cubicles went quiet, one by one, as eyes turned toward her. She rose, uncertain. A single step forward. The feed cut, and the rebuild began. The first thing I didn't do was fire Gregory. It was promoting Danielle. The executive lounge still smelled like roasted arrogance. Cinnamon lattes, mahogany polish, and the ghost of men who assumed the skyline belonged to them. But this morning, the tone had shifted. Whispers trailed through the elevator halls like static. Some said I'd dismantled the board. Others wondered if the rumors were true, that I'd bought the company from under their feet. No one spoke directly to me. Not yet. I stood near the espresso machine when Danielle stepped into the annex, fidgeting with her ID badge like it might vanish. "Ms. Wren?" she asked, unsure whether to curtsy or run. I smiled. "Come with me." We walked in silence, passing hushed assistants and sidelong glances. Jenna held the elevator without a word. Down to HR floor 4. Inside, I handed Danielle a printed folder, thick, formal, sealed in embossed linen. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "Interim Director of Systems," she read aloud, then looked up at me, stunned. "Is this real?" "I saw how you think. That textbook, the calls you handled. You're the kind of mind Virelix needs. Not the ones who memorized scripts, the ones who rewrite them." Danielle blinked fast, then pressed her lips together. "I never thought. No one ever." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Jenna leaned in and tapped the document gently. HR will audit your entire performance history. The hiring freeze is officially suspended. You'll build your team from scratch. Danielle stared at the signature line. I handed her my pen. She signed. Then I initialed. Neat, slow strokes beside her name. Authority and intent, side by side. HR wheeled in a cart with fresh onboarding kits for leadership. One of the junior reps paused awkwardly. Do we notify Gregory Sutton of these changes? I didn't have to answer. Because at that exact moment, Gregory burst through the glass door to my office, face flushed, breathing heavy. You're making a mistake, he growled. I didn't flinch. No, Gregory, I'm correcting yours. Gregory didn't try to sabotage me. He tried to sidestep me. The restaurant was the kind that didn't bother with menus, where reservations were whispered, and handshakes carried six-figure consequences. Anton Pellegrini slid into the leather booth across from Gregory, the clink of cutlery barely audible over the muffled jazz. They both ordered nothing. Jenna's voice came softly into my earpiece. Audio feed is stable. They're on Gregory's company phone, which means he's either arrogant or desperate. I leaned back in the car, parked 3 blocks away, watching the encrypted live feed on my phone. Gregory was smiling, that smug, sideways smile he used when playing dumb. Except this time, he wasn't bluffing ignorance. He was making a move. You're saying you've got enough leverage for a buyback? Anton asked, swirling his scotch. Gregory folded his hands. Let's just say I know where the pressure points are. Cassandra Wren bought loyalty, not permanence. The right noise from a few of your investors could shake a few shaky hands on our board. Anton didn't blink. That's dangerous talk, Greg. It's not talk, Gregory said, pulling a slip of paper from his pocket. It's arithmetic. You get 28% of the float. I handle the rest internally. Temporary chaos, yes, but controlled. Jenna pinged me. He's drafting an email to Anton. It has a private CSV, anonymized trading behavior and exposure logs. That's proprietary data. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to hear him say it. Gregory leaned in. I don't want to destroy the company. I want to rescue it. She's impulsive, unpredictable. You hedge against volatility, don't you? Anton narrowed his eyes. If this leaks? The SEC? She won't leak it. She's too polished. All shine, no teeth. He didn't realize the server clearing their empty table was ours, or that his phone's audio had been mirrored for the last 12 hours, or that every click, every keystroke was already indexed. Jenna's voice came through, calm and clinical. Ready to submit filing under SEC Clause 10B. I glanced out at the streetlight flickering above my windshield. Let him play checkers. Do it, I said. Freeze his account. Gregory's face when the legal courier entered? Worth every late night I ever spent building Aegis. The double glass doors swung open with a quiet authority, and in walked 2 representatives from Hallwell Strategies, followed by a uniformed SEC observer carrying a sealed envelope. Gregory turned mid-sentence, still explaining to Marjorie why overreaction was Cassandra's default mode, and froze. Mr. Sutton, the courier said, placing the envelope in front of him. Formal delivery under SEC Clause 10B. Immediate review recommended. Gregory's hand hovered above the envelope, unsure whether to grab it or run from it. Jenna didn't hide her grin. Let's begin, I said, standing at the head of the table. This emergency session is on record. Marjorie rolled her eyes but didn't object. Victor adjusted his tie like it might choke him. I projected the first slide, a screenshot of Gregory's email to Anton Pellegrini, complete with metadata, timestamps, and recipient log. The room darkened around the edges. This, I said, is a direct breach of fiduciary responsibility. He attempted to incite a hostile acquisition using internal datasets flagged as proprietary. Gregory's voice cracked. This is absurd. That file never sent. Jenna raised her tablet. Drafted, encrypted, and preloaded, just not executed. Intent matters. Hallwell's lead counsel slid forward another document. Virelix Capital Group's bylaws allow for immediate suspension under Article 14.2. Mr. Sutton's access is revoked pending investigation, effective now. The silence after that was colder than contempt. Marjorie glanced at Victor, who was sweating through his collar. Surely this can be tabled until full review. No, I said, pulling another folder from the stack. Per my controlling proxy rights, I invoke Article 9.1c. A vote isn't necessary if shareholder majority is pre-certified. Which it is. Marjorie sat back, stunned. Gregory looked as if someone had cut the floor beneath him. Victor leaned slightly toward me. No one noticed, but I caught the whisper as clearly as if he'd shouted. "I'll flip sides," he murmured. "Just don't dig into Zurich." I didn't respond. Just tapped my pen once, then twice, against the polished mahogany. The rhythm of fear was mine now. I didn't expect Zurich to be literal, or this stupid. The lights in my apartment were dimmed, but the glow from 3 separate monitors painted the room in icy blue. One screen displayed login traces from Victor Huang's company devices. Another, a zoomed-in spreadsheet that Jenna had decrypted less than an hour ago. The third showed wire transfers, quiet, recurring, precision-calibrated, all ending in the same place. Zurich. Jenna paced behind me, barefoot, nursing a cup of peppermint tea like it was scotch. He really didn't even try to cover the trail. Used the same offshore trust name from that gala donation in 2022. Which means he never thought he'd have to hide it from anyone who mattered, I said flatly. I clicked on a PDF attachment marked Valen Strategic Legacy Fund, listed under a shell corp tied to Victor's cousin. The account statements showed deposits that coincided, to the day, with 3 consecutive cost-cutting quarters at Virelix. Budgets slashed, R&D halted. Junior staff quietly let go. All so Victor could stabilize his family's collapsing real estate empire in Shenzhen. I played the voicemail he left me after the emergency board meeting. His tone was panicked under the polish. "Cassandra, it's not what you think. I mean, the Zurich account was never intended to hurt the company. It was transitional liquidity. My family..." I paused the message. He called it transitional liquidity. That's cute. Jenna leaned in. "So what's the move? Fire him?" "Not yet." I composed an email, CC'd Hallwell and the internal ethics officer. The subject line, Interim voting adjustment, Mr. Victor Huang. Attached was a silent agreement. Victor would remain on the board, but forfeit all voting rights for 6 months pending review. Technically, it wasn't a suspension, but effectively, it made him a ghost with a nameplate. Jenna hit send. 30 seconds later, Victor texted me one line. "Please, just don't go public." I stared at the screen, my fingers resting on the keyboard. "One down," I murmured. Then leaned back, smiling. 1 to go. Of everyone, it was Elias Monroe who left the blueprint I needed. The plaque on the office door read, "Monroe Strategic Advisory," brass letters against frosted glass. Modest, unassuming. But the moment I stepped inside, I could smell the precision. Leather-bound contracts stacked at perfect right angles, chrome pens aligned like scalpels. A paralegal offered coffee I didn't take. Elias was waiting in his office. He hadn't changed much, still wore the same sharp 3-piece suits, the same tired eyes that had once flickered with something like regret. He stood as I entered, extending a hand I didn't shake. "I figured this day would come," he said, sitting back down. "Didn't think it would take you this long." I placed the file on his desk. Zurich transactions, Gregory's encrypted email draft, a time-coded crosswalk between Virelix budget cuts and offshore fund deposits, all watermarked, all damning. Elias flipped through the pages with practiced detachment, nodding slightly at each signature and timestamp. You knew about Gregory's patterns, I said. You were CFO when it started. I was also under contract, he replied. You think I liked signing off on those reallocations? I tried to flag it once. They buried the minutes. Jenna had told me the same thing. Internal logs showed a missing segment in the board's archive from Q3 2020. Deleted. Sanitized. You helped bury it, I said, eyes level. I did, Elias replied softly. I also kept a copy. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk, pulled out a slim drive in a steel case, and laid it in front of me. Board memos, audit logs, 2 internal emails that never made it into the official record. One of them has Gregory discussing offshore asset insulation. I trust you know what to do. I didn't thank him. Not out of spite, but because he knew this wasn't about favors. This was about fire. If you're going to burn them down, he said, leaning back, use this as the match. I took the drive, slid it into my coat pocket. Outside, Brooklyn Heights glimmered under a low gray sky. The wind had picked up. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I heard my own voice inside my head. Steady, cold. The next board meeting won't be a presentation. It'll be an autopsy. They called it a quarterly review. I called it a reckoning. The boardroom gleamed with sterile efficiency, polished wood and chrome, giving the illusion of control. They had even laid out bottled water with labels turned perfectly forward, as if symmetry could shield them. I entered without fanfare, Jenna a step behind me, carrying a slim leather case. Elias Monroe sat quietly in the corner, back straight, eyes forward, the ghost of their past given shape and voice. Victor looked pale, his tie slightly askew. Marjorie wore her usual tight-lipped smile, the kind that made people feel small. I took the head seat, not because anyone offered it, but because it was already mine. Shall we begin? I said. A nod rippled around the table. The screen lit up behind me. Today's agenda, I continued, includes a brief operational review and an extended session on governance irregularities. Specifically, those spanning from the fourth quarter of 2020 to the first quarter of 2023. Marjorie raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware we'd scheduled an audit presentation. You didn't, I said. I did. Jenna tapped a button and the screen split into quadrants. Meeting minutes, audit memos, expense authorizations, all color-coded, cross-referenced, and marked with the names of those who'd signed them. One quadrant zoomed in. Here, I said, we see the original minutes from January 2021. And here, the redacted version filed 6 hours later. Notice anything missing? Gregory's name. And the note about rerouting R&D funds in preparation for diversification into international markets. Another click. A slide flicked up. Zurich, trust activity logs. Victor shifted in his chair. Elias, I said, gesturing. He stood, cleared his throat. 3 years ago, I was asked to omit certain financial line items from audit disclosures. I regret complying, but I've retained backup files, including voice memos. Jenna cued the audio. Gregory's voice filled the room. No one checks post-meeting summaries. Just say we agreed in principle. They'll nod. They always do. Silence. I turned to Victor. He looked down. No defense. Marjorie straightened in her chair, tone clipped. This is highly irregular. These are serious accusations, Cassandra. You're undermining... I cut her off with a single raised finger. There's more, I said. Let's not speculate. I reached into the leather case, pulled out a small, slim remote, and turned toward the screen again. Shall we show them the footage from Zurich? The screen didn't just show numbers. It showed betrayal, line by line. I stood without speaking for a moment, letting the spreadsheet linger. The silence was thick with the weight of consequence. The Virelix boardroom, for all its polished glass and expensive art, had never felt so brittle. Jenna advanced the slide. Account names appeared in bold. Kellstrom Holdings, AG, Whitelark Education Trust, and finally, C. Marjorie Crane, beneficiary. Dates matched precisely to R&D budget adjustments from 2021. Figures danced across the screen, traced to Zurich accounts, masked through a shell foundation allegedly used for international philanthropy. The first murmur came from a junior member seated near the door, an audible, sharp breath. Victor dropped his gaze. Marjorie, however, held hers defiantly, arms crossed like she could fold the truth away. "That's absurd," she said, voice calm but frayed at the edges. "You're misinterpreting those filings. They're incomplete, out of context." "Then let's add context," I replied. Jenna tapped again. Audio began. Gregory's voice. "She won't notice if it's clean enough. Marjorie has a great filter. She pretends not to know where things land." From the far speaker, Gregory's remote call-in crackled. "That was a joke, and you know it." "Cassandra." I didn't look at the screen. "You're suspended, Gregory. This isn't your meeting anymore." Elias stood next to me. He held a thin, yellowed manila envelope, the kind we used to toss into archive boxes and forget. From it, he withdrew 2 sheets of meeting minutes, each faintly marked in Marjorie's cursive. "Discuss off-record only. Too exposed." He laid them flat on the table. A camera above streamed the handwriting live to every terminal in the room. Marjorie leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "That proves nothing. I take shorthand. It's messy. This is a vendetta." I raised a hand. "Is this also shorthand?" I pressed play again. A grainy clip appeared. Security footage from the HR annex hallway. Danielle, clutching a training binder, stepped out of a cubicle, visibly shaken. Then Marjorie's voice, low and sharp. "You're here to take calls. Not to pretend you're leadership material. Know your place." Gasps. Even Victor looked stunned. I turned slowly. Danielle never reported it. She thought it would end her job. She misunderstood. Marjorie's voice cracked. "You made sure she did." Silence. I didn't say more. I didn't have to. Then a voice broke through. Young, tentative, but steady. "I move for immediate expulsion of both parties." Heads turned. It was Miles Peretti, the junior board member barely 6 months into his tenure. His face was pale, but his back was straight. Jenna looked over at me. I didn't nod. I didn't need to. I sat back down in the chair at the head of the table, folded my hands, and watched them finally move. By the time the vote concluded, Marjorie was already gone. She didn't wait for the formal announcement or the legal paperwork to be served. Her chair sat vacant, its wheels slowly spinning from her abrupt departure. Across the room, Victor remained hunched, silent, eyes fixed on the table in front of him. Only the voice of the corporate secretary reading the final tally broke the stillness. 7 in favor, 1 abstention, motion carries. I didn't smile. I didn't move. I simply stood. The hallway outside the boardroom had transformed. PR assistants moved briskly, setting up lights and confirming sound for a company-wide stream. Jenna handed me a printed brief, leadership restructuring bullet points, drafted and refined down to a single sentence that mattered. Effective immediately, Cassandra Wren assumes executive control as acting chair and CEO. I signed it with one stroke. Send it. Elias approached, his face unreadable. "That was precise," he said quietly. "There's nothing elegant about cleaning up rot," I replied. Downstairs in the press annex, the first news pings had already begun. My phone buzzed 3 times in succession, all from the same thread, statement from Gregory Sutton. The link opened to a video clip hosted on a news aggregator. Gregory sat in the leather chair of his study, with a fireplace lit behind him, though the July heat outside made it absurd. He wore his usual navy pinstripe, tie knotted too tightly. The lighting was dramatic, likely intentional. To the loyal teams at Virelix, he began, and to the investors who have trusted us for decades, I regret to inform you that today, a hostile restructuring took place. Under the guise of justice, a vendetta was executed. Let me be clear. This is not the end of my role in the industry. I've survived storms greater than this. He leaned forward slightly. There will be questions. There will be scrutiny. But if the new leadership believes removing legacy wisdom will safeguard the company, I urge caution. Not all tides recede peacefully. Veiled threats, bluster, but no denial. I forwarded the video to Jenna with one note: prepare the memo. 10 minutes later, a clean internal document appeared on every executive terminal, time-stamped and authenticated. It detailed Gregory Sutton's proposal, dated 6 months earlier, to sell provisional R&D patent clusters to an offshore buyer registered in Macau. The buyer, it noted, had no verified ties to the research field. At the bottom, status, rejected by compliance, flagged under Clause 4.7 for potential breach of strategic confidentiality. I walked to the center of the media wing. Lights came on. A technician counted me down from 3. I faced the camera. This company has always claimed to be driven by data, but data means nothing without truth. Effective immediately, Virelix will not only restructure its leadership, it will restructure its values. I paused. No more backroom deals. No more selective mentorship. We will rebuild, not rebrand. I nodded to the director. The feed cut. Behind me, Jenna stepped in close and whispered, "Press just picked up the Zurich wire. It's going public." The hallway didn't erupt. It hushed. Because sometimes the loudest sound in power isn't thunder. It's the moment before collapse. Cleaning house isn't glorious. It's necessary. The workshop buzzed with quiet intent. Not the urgency of crisis, but the quiet weight of rebuilding. Whiteboards lined the walls, each covered in sticky notes, metrics, and restructured workflow drafts. For once, the conversations weren't about pleasing investors. They were about solving problems. I stood by the edge of the table listening as Danielle gestured confidently through a presentation. Clean lines, sharp thinking, no posturing. She didn't need permission anymore. She had presence. "We could pilot the equity share structure with support teams first," she suggested, clicking to a slide. "Transparent contribution-based percentages. Every department gets stake alignment, not just title-based grants." Someone in the corner murmured, "That's radical." I smiled. "That's exactly the point. Approved. Get legal drafting." Danielle blinked. "You're serious?" "I promoted you to lead systems, not to ask if I'm serious." Her face cracked into a grin. It suited her. In the adjoining HR review center, old policies were being re-examined. The tenure freeze was gone. Feedback loops, mentorship pools, and a whistleblower fund were in development. Jenna moved between teams like current through wire, threading action into every corner. Elias had returned briefly that afternoon, papers in hand. He waited until the sessions calmed before approaching me in the hallway outside. "This isn't corporate," he said, passing me a folder. "But it's from someone who mattered." Inside, a copy of the Virelix Charter, dated 1997, and stapled behind it, a memo on yellowed stationery, typed but hand-signed, my father's signature, "To whom it may concern." If anything were to happen to me, or I were to step aside, Cassandra Wren is to be considered first in succession, not because she is my daughter, but because she understands that power is only useful when shared. Dated April 2009. I was 19. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. I did neither. I just folded the paper back and whispered, "You trusted me before I even knew I should trust myself." That evening, I stood alone on the rooftop of my apartment. Manhattan stretched beneath me, golds and coppers melting across the skyline. The city didn't care what I'd done today. That was the beauty of it. Elias was gone. Gregory and Marjorie were echoes. Virelix didn't need saviors now. It had stewards. The air smelled like spring, but sharp, like something had been scorched clean. They called me junior staff, in my own company. Now they call me by title. The lights were different up here, softer somehow. Or maybe it was the absence of condescension. The annual Virelix Shareholders Summit had once been a theater of legacy ego. Now it felt like something rebuilt from the ground up. I stepped onto the stage as the applause began, measured and real. No teleprompter, no handlers. Just a card in my pocket with 4 bullet points, none of which I needed. 3 years ago, I began, I pitched a model built on 2 pillars, predictive intelligence and human trust. I was told it was too ambitious, too abstract, and most memorably, adorably optimistic. Soft laughter. Jenna stood in the wings, arms folded, head high. I continued. What wasn't adorable was the pattern we uncovered. Quiet silencing, rigid hierarchies, selective mentorship. What wasn't abstract were the lives stagnated under invisible ceilings. The camera panned across the audience. Employees, partners, former skeptics. Even Victor sat near the back row, now officially retired, his hands clasped in calm resignation. Elias leaned forward, notepad untouched, eyes fixed. Today, I said, we're formalizing a new internal body, the Employee Voice Fund. Dissent is no longer risky. It's currency. It belongs in our balance sheets. The murmurs of approval weren't for me. They were for themselves, for the chance to matter. And one more thing, I said. There's a woman who sat on floor 11, solving problems no one bothered to look at. She is now the director of system strategy. Danielle Moore. Would you please stand? Danielle rose, face flushed, hands trembling slightly. The applause this time was louder, truer. I met her eyes and nodded once. This wasn't about heroics. This was course correction. I closed the card in my hand, didn't read from it. Instead, I turned, walked slowly to the center of the stage, where the singular black leather chair waited. The one that had never changed, no matter who sat in it. For 2 decades, it had been Marjorie's. Until now. I sat. Silence followed. No music, no banners, just that moment. The summit camera zoomed out. My voice carried through the hall even as I spoke softly. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it takes its seat and simply stays. They called me junior staff. Said I was lucky to even have a badge. I remember the way Gregory grinned when he handed me the offer, as if it were a favor. I remember the way Marjorie looked through me, not at me, like I was air with credentials. What they never realized was that I wasn't waiting for validation. I was documenting everything. From the elevator ride down to floor 11 to the clipboard filled with Danielle's ideas dismissed as out of scope, I was building something far more complex than a company takeover. I was building a case, 1 page, 1 insult, 1 dismissal at a time. While they thought I was beneath them, I was already above, studying their patterns, watching them unravel themselves. The boardroom that once silenced me now held its breath when I entered. The voices that laughed at my vision were now the ones scrambling for exit strategies, severance clauses, or simply an alibi. And Gregory? He didn't even get to choose his downfall. The law did that for him. I didn't raise my voice. I raised evidence. But none of it was about revenge. Not really. Because revenge burns fast. Justice endures. When I invited Danielle upstairs, it wasn't just a promotion. It was a correction, a signal to every overlooked talent still hiding behind support desks and silenced ideas. When I let Elias Monroe testify, it wasn't to exonerate him, but to remind everyone that complicity ages poorly, and that redemption, if it ever comes, must be earned with confession. Zurich was never just about wire transfers. It was about the rot they thought could stay offshore, the secrets they believed would never surface. But the thing about silence is, it holds receipts. Especially when someone like me is listening. I've sat in every chair in this company, the interns, the analysts, the founders, and now the one at the center of the table. Each left a mark. Each taught me something different. The higher I climbed, the clearer I saw. Power without scrutiny decays into cruelty. And yet the truth? It was never just about them. It was about all of us. The ones told we were too young, too poor, too unpolished, too soft-spoken. The ones who stayed up at night reworking pitch decks while the doors stayed locked. The ones who heard again and again that our time would come, and finally realized no one hands you your time. You take it. You build it. You become it. The lesson isn't mine alone. Justice doesn't descend from the sky. It rises from the floorboards, from whispered ideas, from people who refuse to stay quiet. Power isn't permanent. But truth? That's got roots. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late. But once heard, it echoes through every corner it was once denied. In a world where injustice often wears a tailored suit and a calm smile, where manipulation is mistaken for leadership and silence for consent. Cassandra Wren's story is a reminder that resilience in silence is not weakness, but strategy. That the smartest people in the room might just be the ones no one bothered to see. So if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, erased, don't rage for attention. Prepare for revelation, because perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. And no wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Thank you for listening, not just to my story, but to the truths too many are told to keep quiet. What happened at Virelix wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about Gregory or Marjorie or Victor. It was about a culture, one that rewards silence, punishes dissent, and calls it professionalism. But silence doesn't equal consent, and sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the loudest truth. I built my power not through rage, but through record, through proof, through knowing that one day someone would need to know they weren't alone. So if you're still sitting on floor 11, in any version of your life, know this. Your voice matters. Your vision matters. You don't have to burn bridges to move forward. But you do have to stop handing matches to the ones building your cage. To everyone who's been dismissed as ambitious, or too emotional, or not quite a fit. I see you. To every Danielle out there, quietly brilliant in the shadows, I believe in you. To every survivor of quiet cruelty in glass offices and boardrooms masked as opportunity, I built this story for you. If this resonated with you, please consider sharing it. Comment below with your story, your victory, your struggle, or even your silence. This is a space for voice. And if you believe that justice doesn't always roar, but it always arrives, hit that subscribe button. Because I'll be right here, telling stories that were once only whispered behind closed doors. Until next time, stay steady, stay sharp, and never apologize for taking up space. Cassandra Wren.